The challenge that shut up Joe Frazier. The gym was stuffy, the air thick with the smell of sweat and leather from punching bags. Bruce Lee moved with the precision of a feline, his fists cutting through the air in rapid sequences, each blow charged with controlled energy. All around him, students were training, but their eyes were fixed on the man who had just entered, Joe Frazier, the heavyweight champion known for his brute strength and devastating punch. Frazier watched Bruce with a smirk, his arms crossed over his broad chest. He was not a man to beat around the bush. Taking a step forward, he broke the silence. "I heard you're fast, Chinese. But tell me one thing, can you really fight?" The words fell like a hammer on the wooden floor. The students stopped, their gazes turned to Bruce. He didn't move right away. He just took a deep breath, his muscles relaxed, his dark eyes fixed on Frazier's. Then, with a calm that contrasted with the tension in the air, he replied. "Fighting isn't about who hits hardest, Joe. It's about who hits first, who moves without being seen, who turns his opponent's strength against himself. You can knock down walls with one punch, but I knock men down before they even know they're falling." Frazier frowned, the smile fading. Bruce continued, his voice low, almost a whisper that forced the champion to lean in to listen. "Have you ever seen a tiger attack? It doesn't roar first. It doesn't warn you. It's just there, and then it's not there anymore. The fight is over before the other person notices. That's what I do." The silence that followed was dense. 20 seconds. 20 seconds in which Frazier found no words. His fists, used to crushing opponents, opened and closed without purpose. He had expected a fiery response, a challenge, perhaps even a display of arrogance. But Bruce Lee had given him none of that. Just the naked truth, said with the confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. Finally, Frazier let out a grunt, shaking his head as if waking from a trance. "Okay, Chinese. Maybe you have something there." And with that, he turned and left the gym, leaving behind not only a man who had challenged him, but a lesson he would never forget. The true art of fighting was not in the size of the punch, but in the precision of the blow. The weight of truth. The days that followed were strange for Frazier. He returned to his training with the same intensity as always, but something had changed. Their sparring partners were no longer the same. Before, each blow was a declaration of strength, a hammer hitting flesh and bone. Now, however, his movements seemed slower, as if carrying the weight of a new doubt. His coaches noticed. "Joe, what's going on?" "You're hesitant," said Eddie Futch, his coach, watching him dodge a jab with an unnecessarily wide movement. Frazier did not immediately respond. He just shook his head, as if he could shake off the echo of Bruce Lee's words. "That's what I do." That night, in the locker room, he looked at himself in the mirror. The face marked by years of battles, the nose slightly crooked, the eyes tired. Behind that champion mask, something bothered him. It wasn't fear. It was something worse, the feeling that, perhaps, he didn't know as much as he thought he did. The silent challenge. 2 weeks later, Frazier received an unexpected invitation. A charity tournament in Hong Kong, organized by an old boxing friend. Among the names of the guests, one caught his attention, Bruce Lee, master of martial arts. He hesitated. It wasn't an official challenge, but the idea of locking eyes with Lee again made him uneasy. Deep down, I knew it wasn't about winning. It was about understanding. On the day of the event, the gym was packed. Frazier took to the ring for a boxing demonstration, receiving warm applause. When it was his turn to speak, he looked out into the audience and saw Lee sitting in the front row, arms crossed, watching with that same easy smile. "Today I'm not going to talk about strength," said Frazier, surprising even himself. "I'm going to talk about something I recently learned. Sometimes the best way to win is not with the hardest punch, but with the smartest." The crowd applauded, but Frazier didn't take his eyes off Lee. The Chinese man nodded, almost imperceptibly, as if to say, "Now you understand." The last lesson. Years later, already retired, Frazier received an unexpected visitor at his gym in Philadelphia. A young fighter, arrogant and full of himself, entered with the same posture he once had. "I heard that the great Joe Frazier still trains here." "I want to see if that's all it is," said the boy, crossing his arms. Frazier looked at him, remembering another challenge, another fighter who didn't need to prove anything. Instead of responding angrily, he smiled. "You know, kid, I was once like you. I thought strength was everything. But one day, a man showed me that the real fight begins when you stop trying to crush your opponent and start understanding the game." The young man frowned, confused. "So, you're not going to fight me?" Frazier shook his head. "No. But if you want to learn, I'll teach you." And so, without punches, without shouting, without demonstrations of power, Joe Frazier gave his last lesson, that true greatness is not in winning but in growing. The lesson of the ring. The boy, whose name was Marcus, hesitated for a moment. His body was still vibrating with the adrenaline of the challenge, his fists clenched as if expecting an immediate battle. But something in Frazier's calm gaze made him let his guard down. It wasn't fear, nor submission, it was something deeper, as if the old champion had seen something in him that he himself hadn't yet seen. "Learn what?" he asked, his voice less arrogant, but still full of distrust. Frazier pointed to the empty ring, where years of fighting had left marks on the ropes and wooden floor. "Breathing before attacking. Listening to your opponent's rhythm. Not wasting energy on punches that don't land. Fighting with your head, not just your fists." Marcus laughed in disbelief. "This is philosophy, not boxing." Frazier was unfazed. He picked up a pair of old gloves and threw them at the boy's feet. "Then prove it. 3 rounds. No rules, just you and me. But with one condition, with every blow you throw without thinking, I'll show you why it failed." The challenge was clear. Marcus put on his gloves, feeling the worn leather against his skin. He climbed into the ring, his feet unsteady, as if the floor were made of quicksand. Frazier, even at 60, moved with the lightness of a man who knew every inch of that space. There was no rush to his movements, just precision. In the first round, Marcus attacked like a bull. Large, predictable punches, easy to dodge. Frazier barely moved, just tilted his body enough for the blows to miss. When Marcus attempted a left hook, Frazier simply ducked and responded with a light tap on the shoulder, not a punch, but a reminder. "You are fighting a ghost. I am not the enemy. The enemy is your own impulse." Marcus growled, frustrated. In the second round, he tried to be more calculated, but his anger still blinded him. Frazier let him tire, blocking each attack with economy of movement. Then, when Marcus let his guard down for a second, Frazier touched his chin with a gentle jab, not to hurt, but to wake him up. "You see, but you don't see." In the third round, something changed. Marcus stopped trying to win and started watching. He noticed how Frazier always kept his feet aligned, how his breathing was controlled, how his eyes never stopped following his opponent's movements. Then, when Frazier came forward with a slow cross, Marcus didn't dodge. Instead, he turned his body and responded with a clean counterattack, hitting the champion's side. Frazier smiled, as if he had been waiting for that moment. "Now yes." The round ended. Marcus is panting, took off his gloves and threw them on the floor. He wasn't mad. It was different. As if a layer of pride had been peeled away, leaving something lighter underneath. "Why did you do that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Frazier wiped the sweat from his forehead with a towel. "Because one day, someone did that for me. And because the world already has too many fighters who only know how to destroy. It needs more people who know how to build." Marcus looked at his hands, still shaking. There were no trophies, no applause, no blood. But for the first time, he felt like he had truly won something. "Can I come back tomorrow?" Frazier nodded. "Whenever you want. But remember, the ring is just a place. The real fight is outside. And so, without another word, the old champion turned his back and walked towards the locker room, leaving Marcus alone in the ring, with the echo of a lesson that would last far beyond that day. Final chapter, The Ring and the World. The following months were of slow transformation, like a river that wears away stone. Marcus returned to the gym every day, no longer to punch bags or dodge punches, but to learn what Frazier called the art of balance. It wasn't about beating your opponent, but about not letting yourself be overcome by your own anger. The old trainer taught him to breathe between blows, to measure his strength not by the damage he caused, but by how firmly he remained standing. A man who only knows how to attack is like a building without a foundation, said Frazier, adjusting the bandages on Marcus' hands. Sooner or later, he falls. And the ground is unforgiving. Marcus listened. Sometimes he disagreed silently. After all, it was violence that had kept him alive on the streets, that had made him feared when there was nothing else to fear. But something in him no longer believed that. Maybe it was the tiredness of waking up with swollen knuckles and an empty soul. Maybe it was the way Frazier looked at him, not as a championship project, but as a son he never had. One night after training, Marcus found the gym empty except for a skinny boy, no older than 12, leaning against the ring ropes. The boy had a black eye and split lips, and he looked at Marcus with a mixture of defiance and desperation. "You're Marcus, right?" asked the boy, spitting blood on the floor. "They say you were the best before you turned soft." Marcus stopped. He recognized that tone. It was the same one he used years ago, when he teased his elders just to prove that he wasn't afraid. But now, instead of anger, he felt something like pity. "Who did this to you?" he asked, pointing to the boy's face. "No one. I won." The boy lifted his chin. "I just didn't expect him to hit so hard." Marcus sighed. He sat in the ring, his legs dangling over the side. "Come here." The boy hesitated but ended up approaching. Marcus took the bandages off his own hands and wrapped them around the boy's, carefully. "Hitting is easy," he said. "The hard part is knowing when to stop." "And why?" The boy frowned. "You're talking like that old man." "It's because he's right." Marcus finished tying the bandages and patted the boy on the shoulder. "Come on. Let's train. But today, you won't punch anything. Today, you'll learn to move." Years later, Marcus was no longer a fighter. Or rather, he was, but not the kind who climbs into rings to win belts. Frazier's gym had transformed into something bigger, a community center where young men like him, angry and aimless, learned that strength was not synonymous with destruction. Some came because of the boxing classes. Others, because they had nowhere to go. But everyone left knowing there was more than one way to fight. Frazier died one winter morning in his sleep. Marcus found him in bed, his hands still calloused, his face serene as if he had fallen asleep in the middle of a workout. There was no pompous wake, just a bonfire in the gym's backyard, where everyone who passed by lit a candle and told a story about the old coach. Marcus spoke last. "He taught me that the fight doesn't end when you win. It ends when you decide you don't need to fight anymore." That night, as the flames crackled, Marcus looked out at the empty ring. He remembered the boy he had been, the hatred he carried like armor. And then, for the first time, he felt he was free. Epilogue, The Legacy. The gym still exists. Now, it has a name, Frazier's Corner. On the walls, instead of posters of famous fighters, there are photos of students, some smiling, others with shadowy eyes, but all standing. Marcus runs the place, but is no longer the center of attention. Sometimes when a newbie comes in full of fire, he takes him aside and says, "You want to learn to fight? Great. But first, tell me, what are you willing not to fight for?" Nobody responds right away. But over time, they understand. And so, the fight continues. Not in the rings, but in the streets, in schools, in homes where silence weighs more than punches. Because, at the end of the day, Frazier was right, the ring was just a place. The real fight has always been out there. Final chapter, The Scars That Teach. Summer in Frazier's corner came with a sticky, skin-deep, humid heat, but inside the gym the air was cool, thick with the smell of old leather and dried sweat. Marcus was in the corner, adjusting the gloves of a thin boy, no more than 12 years old, whose eyes were bulging with fear and excitement. The boy's name was Hyro, and he had already been beaten twice that week, once at school, for not delivering lunch to a group of bullies, and another at home, when his stepfather lost his patience with the noise from the television. "Breathe," Marcus murmured, squeezing the Velcro too tightly, on purpose. "If you hold your breath, the punch will hurt more." Hyro swallowed hard. "I don't want to get hit again." "Then learn not to give reasons." The boy frowned. "Like this?" Marcus crouched down until he was at his level. "Do you think I never got hit? That Frazier never got hit?" He pointed to a photo on the wall, a faded image of a thin black man, with bandaged hands and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was beaten every day. On the street, at school, even in the ring. But he knew something that others didn't know: being beaten is not the end. It's just the beginning. Hyro looked at his hands, small and shaking. "What if I don't make it?" "You already did it." Marcus touched the boy's shoulder. "You came here. That's more than most people do." Across town, in a tiny apartment that smelled of mold and burnt food, Lena was packing her bags for the third time that month. His mother was sitting on the couch, eyes glued to the afternoon soap opera, while her boyfriend, a man with tattooed arms and beer breath, snored in the bedroom. Lena was 16 years old and had a purple bruise on her left arm from her last accident with the door. She didn't cry anymore. The tears had long since dried up, replaced by a cold anger that burned inside. He picked up his backpack, checked if he had enough money for the bus and left without saying goodbye. I knew where to go. Frazier's corner was nearly empty when she arrived. Only Marcus and an older man with gray hair and a crooked nose cleaned the ring. She stood in the doorway, hands stuffed in her coat pockets, trying to look more confident than she felt. "I need to learn how to hit," she said, bluntly. Marcus looked up. He recognized her expression, that mix of defiance and desperation he'd seen on dozens of faces before. The older man stopped what he was doing and watched her carefully. "Why?" Marcus asked. "Because I don't want to be afraid anymore." He exchanged a look with the old man, who gave a slight nod. "Okay," Marcus said. "But there's a rule: you'll only learn to hit after you learn not to hit." Lena frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "Yes, it does." He pointed to a bench. "Sit down. Let's talk." The months passed, and the gym filled with new voices. Hyro, who previously trembled when he heard footsteps behind him, now taught the basic movements to beginners. Lena, who had arrived with her fists clenched and her heart full of poison, discovered that her strength lay not in breaking bones, but in holding the hand of a 14-year-old girl who was crying in the bathroom after being called trash by her father. Marcus watched everything from afar, sometimes. It no longer needed to be in the center. The place was no longer his, never had been, in fact. It was theirs. Of those who arrived broken and learned to get up. Of those who understood, finally, that the fight was not about beating the other, but about not letting the other beat them from within. One night, after the last student left, he found a letter left on the counter. There was no return address, but he recognized Frazier's shaky handwriting. "Marcus. If you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer there to bother you. Don't be sad. The ring was never the point. It was just a place where we could show others that they weren't weak. You got this. Now it's your turn to make others understand too. And don't forget, the world outside won't stop beating. But we won't stop getting up either. Frazier." Marcus folded the letter and put it in his pocket. Outside, the city remained the same: noisy, dirty, full of hurting people and hurting people. But there, between those four walls, something had changed. It was not a sanctuary. It was not a refuge. It was a reminder. He turned off the lights and locked the door. Tomorrow, there would be more new faces. More stories. More fights. And he would be there, as always, to tell them the same thing. Do you want to learn to fight? Excellent. But first, tell me, what are you willing not to fight for?